Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Blake? What? Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron done messed up, didn't put himself on screen. Ron is here, everyone. Welcome back for more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. This is the subject of today's video feels like a sensitive topic. It's a very, very troubling topic. It's one of the most disturbing things about Scientology, about the Scientology belief system. One of the many disturbing things, but to me, one of the most disturbing things. I'm going to play for you guys about a 70, 80-second video I put up yesterday. In a nutshell, the video says that Scientology believes that people who are born with disabilities are evil people. And I wanted to do a dedicated live stream about this little video and about this subject, because I want to answer any questions that you guys have for me on this subject. I'm going to respond to some of the questions and comments that I got about this on the video that I posted yesterday. I put this video up on TikTok and I put it up on YouTube. And actually, let me pull up just for my own use the TikTok video here, because I'm gonna tackle some of the comments here. Permission to ramble for a little bit. So I remember when I first started watching Scientology content on the internet, especially since a lot of that content was curated, edited, narrated, published by non-Scientologists. I could never quite get past all the little things that would be said that I found to be inaccurate. And I always thought to myself what a turnoff it was as an ex-Scientologist to see someone talking about or reporting on Scientology in a way that had so many obvious inaccuracies, and that it tended to confirm the bias that Scientologists have against any coverage of Scientology that is critical, that it's mostly coming from people who don't really know what they're talking about, who are following some talking points being fed by, this person or that person or whatever. And so the reason why I mention that is because it is sometimes very challenging, if not impossible, to be 100% accurate about something you're talking about Scientology if you don't have enough time to get into all of the exceptions and all of the ways that something is true and the situations that something that is true may sometimes also not be true. And now that I'm doing spending a portion of my time specifically creating content for TikTok, which is 60-second, 70-second sound bites, I find myself having to take an aspect of Scientology and distill it down into a sound bite that is as true and accurate as possible, knowing that it's not possible to be 100% accurate given that short amount of time. And so what I might try to do, and what I'm doing in this video, is to take an example of something that I published and to discuss how, in its essence, it is completely true, but to have the opportunity to answer questions about, but doesn't that contradict with this? And doesn't that conflict with this? And how do you explain this? And what about this situation? What about that situation? I think that's going to be a good use of time and a good use of using this short form content to springboard into a greater, more in-depth conversation. Because I'll give you an example. Even the statement itself, Scientology believes disabled people are evil. You might go, but hold on. I thought Scientologists believed that all beings were basically good, no matter how evil they are. And I'd be like, you are exactly correct. You are exactly correct. And that is an example of a way a Scientologist could hear what I'm saying about Scientologists' belief about disabled people and go, now that is not entirely accurate and you're just pushing propaganda. Well, let's have a conversation about it. Okay. And also, the reason I put Jett Travolta's photo in the thumbnail of this video is because as I was preparing just mentally the things that I wanted to discuss in this video, I was going through the comments of my TikTok yesterday, and there were a lot of people commenting on asking about Jett Travolta. And I was reminded about the fact that Scientologists who did not personally know the Travoltas had absolutely no idea about Jett's condition. And this idea of Scientologists thinking that disabled people are basically, particularly people born with disabilities, are evil people, suppressive people, people who in their past lives were suppressive persons. This contributes to a culture of shame surrounding disabled children. It's not a coincidence that nobody in Scientology knew how that Jett was disabled or how disabled he was. It's not a coincidence that his mother, Kelly Preston, a hardcore Scientologist before she passed, literally went on a press campaign lying about what condition Jett actually had. She lied and said he had Kawasaki's disease or Kawasaki syndrome. Jett was severely nonverbal autistic, which never really came to light until after Jett's death. And I'm going to be very careful with my words here. Just like John Travolta doesn't seem to care that Scientology doesn't like gay people, he also and doesn't align with that belief, just like he sort of chooses to ignore that part of Scientology. I believe John Travolta also chose to ignore the part of Scientology that would look down on his son. And I truly believe that John Travolta loved Jett and cared for Jett and wanted Jett to have the most fulfilling, lengthy, and happy life possible, as much as any other of his children. And yet this basic belief of Scientology that I'm talking about, because of this basic belief, I can tell you beyond any shadow of a doubt that most other Scientologists, upon hearing that Jett had died, would probably, even if only secretly, tell you that's what was best for him anyway. He should just pick up a new body and start over. What was the point? What was the point of living a long life in a body that can't do Scientology? And that's a fact. And any Scientologist who denies that fact would be lying to your face. So that's why I put Jett's photo on the thumbnail of this video. But this video is not actually about Jett Travolta personally. Okay, let me show you the video that I published yesterday, and then let's talk about it.
Here's something you didn't know about Scientology.
Scientology believes disabled people are evil.
What?
Yeah. So Scientology believes that if someone is born with a disability, the being in that body specifically caused that body to be born disabled, so that in that lifetime, the being would have a more difficult time committing evil acts to make up for all of the evil acts that being committed in its previous life. In a Scientology auditing session, someone born disabled would be required to recall and take responsibility for all of the harmful, evil, and destructive acts they did in their past lives that caused them to choose to be born disabled in this lifetime. It gets worse. Scientology auditing sessions are conducted using this machine called an e-meter. You're connected to the e-meter by holding these cans. If your disability prevents you from connecting to the e-meter, Scientology would say, what's the point of wasting a lifetime with a body that can't do Scientology? Just drop the body, pick up a new one, and try again. Remember, guys, Scientologists aren't allowed to tell you the truth about Scientology. That's what I'm here for. All right, there you go. That's kind of generally the structure of the videos that I've been doing on TikTok. I think I first mentioned this aspect of Scientology. It was actually one of the first videos I ever did on my channel. I brought this up. And one of the things I tried to explain in the video that I just published, but I ended up editing it for time, is that it's crazy how such a heartless, disgusting belief can stem from an aspect of Scientology, a fundamental belief of Scientology, that is sort of intended to actually be very empowering. It's a weird contradiction. It kind of has to do with, like, what is it that people find appealing about Scientology at all? How does anyone ever get sucked into Scientology? What is it that anybody ever finds valuable when they get into Scientology, you know, at the lower levels right away? And that answer is Scientology's message to you is you are basically an all-powerful God. You are basically so powerful, there's nothing you cannot do or accomplish. And that's not because we're going to give that to you. That's because that's who you natively are. Now, with Scientology's tools, you can get back to that, but that's who you are. And that's like, it's kind of a very self-empowering thing, of like, oh, you can accomplish anything. And then it sort of gets into, yeah, so not only are you completely responsible for anything you've ever done, not only are you totally capable of achieving anything you set your, that you desire, but you're also responsible for anything that's ever happened to you. And that's a trickier thing to wrap your mind around. But you have to figure out how to wrap your mind around that to truly understand the fundamental nature of how powerful you are. And so then you start wrapping your mind as to how you have in any slight way somehow set, the dominoes falling that ended up in something bad happening to you. And even that flow, you've got the flow of you being responsible for things you've done. You've got the flow of being responsible for things that happen to you. Even that sort of flow of figuring out how you're responsible for certain things that happen to you, that can also be empowering to a certain level. But Scientology takes it to the craziest levels of like, and again, I don't want to get too dark and too gross and that kind of stuff, but they take it to the level of, if you're a child and you are abused in some of the worst ways you could imagine, you have to figure out how you in your past lives did something to make that happen to you. That's insane. That's abuse. That's abusive. And then it gets even crazier. I mean, that's pretty much as crazy as you can get, but it gets even crazier when you talk about people being born with conditions that some would categorize as something bad happening to you. And Scientologists being like, you know what that means? I mean, I don't want to have to say it. I wouldn't say this in polite company, but you know what that means, right? And I can tell you right now, even a bunch of Scientologists watching, if they were watching this video, would probably still go, now, come on. That L. Ron Hubbard doesn't actually specifically say that. And I think he does. He does specifically say that. People just don't want to connect the dots in that way. And I speak from experience because for my first 25 years in Scientology, or I should say, by the time I was 25 years old, so maybe my first 21 years in Scientology, it did not quite occur to me that that is how all of the dots connected. I had no reason to think about it. It had never been brought to my attention. It had never been forced to my attention. It was not a subject that was relevant to me in any way until I was in the Sea organization working in Los Angeles. And the position that I held oversaw the department that delivered all of the professional auditing. And there was an old-time veteran Sea Org member who had worked on the Apollo with L. Ron Hubbard named James Fuller. And James Fuller had been a highly technically trained person in Scientology way back to the days of L. Ron Hubbard, to the point where some of Scientology's earlier technical bulletins actually had James Fuller's name on the bottom of them before they got rid of any bulletins that were written by anyone other than L. Ron Hubbard. And there was a young Scientologist getting auditing at the org that I was working at, who, like I just said in that video, had something physically wrong with him that kept him from easily hold on. just kept him from easily being connected to the e-meter. There was something wrong with his hands. And if you can't hold the cans, there are some other ways they can try to connect you to the e-meter. There's metal wrist straps. There's foot plates. You know, these are things I've read about, I've heard of. I've never actually seen them used. I've never even seen a pair of them available to be used. But for this particular guy, they were using some of those alternative ways to hook him up to the e-meter. And there was some problem with his auditing where he was having trouble being well fed and well rested enough to do the auditing session. And somehow James Fuller was involved with this young man's auditing. And you have to understand that a lot of these things in Scientology, like a lot of the things that Scientologists consider to be true or know to be true, especially old timers, don't just come from the literal precise words written in technical bulletins or books or policy letters. They come from the culture that they experienced, things that permeated the culture working under L. Ron Hubbard on the flagship Apollo in the early days of the Sea Org. So when I heard James Fuller say out loud, why are we going to keep wasting our time auditing this SP? At first I was like, what the fuck is James talking about? And he was talking about the fact that this guy was so physically screwed up that it was hard to connect him to the e-meter and that he was born that way. And this is a guy whose understanding of Scientology and what all the technical bulletins really mean and what L. Ron Hubbard really thought and believed and what it was okay to think and say and do. This guy who had worked so closely with L. Ron Hubbard for all those years had no problem saying out loud in a room full of Sea Org members, why are we going to keep wasting our time auditing this SP just because this young man was born with a disability that made it very hard for him to get Scientology auditing? And so I guess I'm telling the story because even by that point in my Scientology career, staff member career, Sea Org career, it had never occurred to me that that's what we believed. And I could, you know, and you notice I use the word we, because if you believe in what L. Ron Hubbard says, there is a we when it comes to what we believe. There's not an I. You don't really get to pick and choose what you believe. Now, again, this might sound like a contradiction because I've said there's plenty of parts of Scientology that I was like, well, I don't believe that. Yeah, but I knew that we did. And I simply chose to accept the fact that there were certain things we believed that I chose not to believe. But so a Scientologist might sit here, like I would have done before that conversation with James Fuller, and said, that's not what we believe. But it is. It is what Scientologists believe. The belief that you are fundamentally an immortal, godlike spiritual being who is fully responsible for anything you've ever done and anything that's ever happened to you. And L. Ron Hubbard's writings about suppressive persons and potential trouble sources and the overt motivator sequence and the second phenomenon of a misunderstood word and committing overt acts and restraining yourself from committing overt acts and pulling in flows towards yourself and pulling in motivators and sicknesses and physical conditions and disabilities. That is what Scientologists and we, when we were all Scientologists, believed. If you're born with a disability, you did it to yourself. Why does someone do something like that to themselves? Because they were committing so many horrific, harmful, evil, destructive acts because they had become an evil being, even though you can't become, you can never really become an evil being, but you can become a being that really does a lot of evil. So L. Ron Hubbard basically says that because as a being, you're basically good. You basically convince yourself to be evil and do evil, but you're still always basically good. And so if you find as a being, you find yourself unable to restrain yourself from committing further evil acts, you will do things to yourself subconsciously, unknowingly. You will cause things to happen to you that will make it harder for you to keep doing overt acts. You will make yourself sick. You will make yourself ill. You will get yourself hit by a car. You will fall off a cliff. You will die. Or you will get born next lifetime in a body that is not as able as a traditional body, and therefore it will be harder for you to do evil acts in that lifetime. This is 100% what Scientologists believe. And I actually get the question. It's surprising how often I get the question in my comments. What do Scientologists believe about, disabled people? How come I don't see disabled people in Scientology? And I don't answer the question all the time because I've done a few videos about it. But now that I'm on TikTok, I was like, you know what? People need to know that this is what Scientologists believe about disabled people. People need to know why this is why the Travoltas kept Jett's condition a secret from anyone other than those who personally worked with the family. This is why for his entire life, his mother never publicly acknowledged that he was autistic. Because Scientologists would be like, the Travoltas had an autistic child? How's that possible? You know what that means. The culture in Scientology is one of shame when it comes to disabilities. Mental, physical, developmental, it doesn't matter. Okay, one of the comments that I saw in my TikTok video was, the comment was basically like, but Scientologists believe that when you die, when you drop your body and you pick up another body, your memory is wiped and you basically start over. You start fresh, you start clean. Your memory is wiped. You don't remember anything. Why would it be relevant, anything that you thought or believed or were or how you behaved in your previous lifetime? That's a very good question. And the answer is that a lot of the way L. Ron Hubbard would explain it is that a lot of what a being does is sort of an automaticity, or it's on automatic, or it's sort of subconscious. Like you're doing it to yourself, but you don't know you're doing it to yourself. It's almost like the part of yourself. Let's say. I'm trying to use a historical example of just some of the most evil people we could possibly imagine. Let's take the guy whose name begins with H. Okay. L. Ron Hubbard would say, the being who occupied the body of the man who ran the Third Reich, that being got to a point where he was doing an awful lot of evil acts. And the part of that being that was still natively good found itself, it's weird because we're talking about this being as if it's multiple personalities, but hell, L. Ron Hubbard had multiple personalities. Okay, the part of the being that was still natively good, because there's no such thing as a being that doesn't have the natively good part, that part found itself unable to restrain the rest of the being from doing all these bad acts. So, but the part of the being that's doing all the bad acts seems to be in control. So, it's almost like the little voice at the bottom of the being that still wants to do good. The little angel voice is like, well, I can't seem to get any traction here, so I'm just going to throw roadblocks in the way. And so anyway, it has nothing to do with memory. It has nothing to do with memory. This idea that L. Ron Hubbard would say that a being would cause themselves to be born into a disabled body, it has nothing to do with conscious thought. And anyway, that's because none of this is all bullshit anyway, you guys. This is just my new favorite description of Scientology is a scam that was invented by a mentally ill sci-fi fantasy writer. And this is, is it supposed to make sense? I mean, I guess L. Ron Hubbard intended for it to make sense, but it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. Okay, let's see. I'm going to tackle some of the questions that are being starred for this particular live stream. And let's see where that takes us. Spock hates Scientology. Well, I guess my son, who is in a wheelchair, can't join. So this is what's interesting. People with disabilities are not prohibited from joining Scientology, just like gay people aren't prohibited. It's very weird. So like, let's take John Travolta. And to be fair, John Travolta is bisexual, not gay. But let's say someone who's openly bisexual goes into a Scientology organization. Scientology wants that person's money as much as anyone else. Scientology thinks that auditing can fix the bisexual part of that person, just like Scientology thinks auditing can fix all the other negative or non-ideal parts of that person. So it's not a disqualification. But it's so weird to have someone to have the idea of someone joining an organization that looks down on something about themselves they can't control, can't change, and probably wouldn't even want to. Why would they want to? I mean, okay, if someone's in a wheelchair, I can understand being like, yeah, sure, I'd like to walk, but I'm never going to be able to. And if I'm going to have to go join this organization and do some mental exercises of how I'm responsible for the fact that I can't walk, why would I want to pay for that? I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but it's like, you know, as I was prepping for this video, I had forgotten about Jett Travolta. I had forgotten that was one of the things the Travolta family had dealt with, was the loss of their son, Jett. And it just brought home to me like, Jesus, John, what is it going to take, man? So you're part of an organization that thinks you're a lesser being, you know, for being bisexual, and you're part of an organization that thought your son was a lesser being for being born with a disability, and you're a part of an organization who most of their members would have quietly celebrated when your son passed, man. What do you support this organization for? And I think I know what you support it for, but it's just like, geez, it's just unbelievable that John still supports this organization. John's never even done all of the OT levels because they won't let John keep going on the OT levels until he stops touching dudes. And John doesn't want to stop touching dudes. But it's like, then why do you want to keep being in Scientology? Is it really worth it? Anyway, I'll just go off on a rant on this. Okay. Kayla says, disabled people are not evil. We are different. I don't think you're evil. I think you're wonderful. Lisa Kelson, I always wonder if Jett Travolta would still be alive if it wasn't for Scientology. It's also very sad. Thank you for bringing this to light, Aaron. Okay, let's talk about that, because I've always been very, very fair on this topic. The information that I have from people who were personally involved with the family is that even though the Travoltas were never wanted to admit that Jett had autism, it's not like he was misdiagnosed. Like, Jett was fully, properly, and completely diagnosed and had seizure medications. Jett suffered from seizures and he had seizure medications. And I have been told by people who are out of Scientology now, but who were involved with the family, that Jett's caretakers had his anti-seizure medications on them at all times. And I believe that. I have no reason not to believe that. I have no reason to believe that they would not have gotten for Jett all of the proper care that he needed. I just have no reason to believe that. And my understanding is that, and again, we only know what information was given to us, right? We assume it was correct. My version of events that I recall hearing is that Jett had just gone up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and he went to the bathroom and he had a seizure and he fell down and he hit his head on the tub. So I'm not going to point fingers to the parents, the caretakers, the nannies, or Scientology for that. It just seems to be one of those tragic things. And someone might go, well, what was he doing allowed to go to the bathroom by himself? Who knows? He didn't always go to the bathroom. Like, I'm not going to, I don't feel the need to second guess those types of things. You know what I mean? Okay. Sharona said, great idea. TikTok, the springboard for a longer discussion on YouTube. I'm glad YouTube doesn't care if I type TikTok. Yes. Ren, wasn't Jett Travolta also an epileptic? Yes, he had he had seizures. Tim Greenglass, people always say Travolta is so nice, but he isn't nice, or else he is just dumb. He lost 3 people to poorly treated illness. Yes. Well, I won't blame John for I won't blame John for Kirstie Alley if waiting too long to get medical care. But you know, yeah. I mean, I know you're talking about his wife Kelly Preston. And just since we're talking about the subject, you know, Scientologists who are at the level of the bridge that the level of Scientology's bridge that Kelly Preston was at, they are told that if you have cancer at that level, that it is the spirits that are stuck to your body that are causing the cancer. The spirits are actually creating the cancer. The spirits are being the cancer. And in order to apply standard Scientology at that level, you know, you're allowed to go to the doctor, but in order to apply standard Scientology at that level, you would have to dedicate your time to getting rid of the spirits that are giving you the cancer. And this is why so many high-level Scientologists die from cancer. They are convinced that the right thing to do is to keep applying standard Scientology to the problem and to fix it with Scientology. And they keep doing that and doing that and doing that, while almost certainly doing every alternative healthcare solution known to man. They probably all go to Dr. David Minkoff and get diagnosed with Lyme disease and take his expensive therapies. And then when the you know, spirit exorcism doesn't work, and then Dr. Minkoff's quack therapies don't work, then they eventually go to a doctor and get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Yeah. Anyway, I know what you're talking about with your comment here. Okay. Nana Tracy Murphy. My granddaughter is severely disabled from birth. At 12, she is a medical miracle and the center of my world, teaching me the depths of my patience and love. That's beautiful, Nana. Matt Elliott, considering John Travolta is gay himself, it's weird that he dismisses the part of being 1-1 in the tone scale. I'm not sure how he got up the bridge because of that. And Matt, he hasn't got up the bridge. I got some conflicting information about what OT level he had gotten to, but that's when the OT levels were done in a different sequence. He's never really gotten past OT3, if he ever even finished OT3. And I did a video a while back. I'm going to have to dig this one up and I'm going to have to do it again, of a very rich Scientologist that was close with the Travoltas. He was a very, very dedicated Scientologist who very much believed in the anti-gay rhetoric espoused by L. Ron Hubbard. And this Scientologist went over to the Travolta's house because they were close friends and they were having dinner. And Travolta, I want to say servant, but that sounds bad. Like whatever the name of the guy is who would be responsible for preparing everything and cooking the food and serving the meal, almost like his butler, his steward. I don't know the real word in the real world, but the guy who was in charge of the household while everyone was there was obviously gay. And when that person was out of earshot, this Scientologist made a horrifically anti-gay slur and statement about the Travolta household staff member in front of John Travolta. Like, this is how Scientologists live in a world of delusion, okay? This Scientologist chose not to recognize or acknowledge that John is bisexual and made a horrifically anti-gay statement and slur about this member of Travolta's household. And Kelly and John got very upset and wrote a report on this Scientologist for saying that anti-gay thing. And the Scientologist then wrote a response to the report basically saying, what's wrong with what I said? That's according to Scientology. It can't be wrong. There can't be anything wrong with what I said because that's what L. Ron Hubbard says. How out of touch can you be? to go into John Travolta's house and insult gay people and then get upset when he gets upset. Anyway, that's an anecdote that I've told. Okay, I don't know this username, but I believe he might get out of the car and join you one day. Is this a non-zero probability? Oh, you're talking about John Travolta. No, I don't think he's going to get out of the car and join us one day. Nurse Lori, hello. It's like the universe is trying to tell John to get out. Yeah. Sharona, I absolutely love that you're using their TikToks to address topics. Oh yeah, I'm piggybacking off of Scientology's own TikToks. Eggert Olafs, I had a cognitively disabled kid working for me a few years back. He knew he was behind and actively trying to find a miracle cure. What? He found Scientology and was sure that it would help him. What? Are you serious? Wow. Oh, it continues. I got wind of it and managed to educate him and those working around him what Scientology thought of kids like him. He decided after watching a bunch of material I gave him not to go there. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. So when I was at the Philadelphia org, the executive director, Samantha Tomlinson, had a physically disabled son. She had two sons. They were half brothers. One son named was Woody, and the other son's name was James. And I feel like I'm going to get the name of the condition wrong. Is it muscular dystrophy? Where it's like a musculoskeletal issue. It had affected how he walked. It very severely affected how he talked. It affected how he could hold his hands and his arms, but it did not seem to actually affect him cognitively at all. And I think this might have been the first example I had ever encountered of a severely physically disabled Scientologist trying to do Scientology. And it was very uncomfortable. And he was doing the auditing that requires you to, you're auditing each other. It's called the objectives processes. And the course is called TRs and objectives, where it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of physical auditing processes. It's not where you're holding the cans and you're being asked questions and you have to answer them. You're walking all over the place. You're touching things. You're picking things up. You're putting things down, and it required a lot. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder why he's doing this auditing if he will never be able to do the other auditing after that. What's the point of doing any of it at all? That's kind of a waste of money, isn't it? I mean, you remember, I've also told the story that I never thought that if I was a public Scientologist, I would ever spend any money on Scientology. Now, I did not have, remember, this was before I met James Fuller. This was before it was sort of shoved in my face that people born with disabilities were like considered SPs in their previous life. And I never had the thought, boy, what's the point of wasting a lifetime if you're disabled? I didn't realize we thought that way at that time. But I do remember thinking, what's the point of wasting all the time and the money doing this lower level of auditing if you're never going to bother doing any, like, either do it all or do none of it. Don't waste your money doing part of it. So that was the only thought that I had. And yeah, anyway, there's that story. Okay. Marie Marion. So my disability didn't start until I was 35. So I guess I'm not evil. Oh no, you're evil, just not in your past life. You've been evil in this lifetime. Or you're connected to a suppressive person that is suppressing you and turning you into a potential trouble source. And that is why you're having sickness and illness and disability. So that is what Scientologists think about people who are chronically ill in this lifetime, that it has to do with suppression. Isn't it weird that there's different rules for whether you're born disabled or whether you become disabled? Being born disabled is worse in the eyes of Scientology. Constance June, didn't some wealthy Scientologist leave because he had a child with autism, and how Scientology treated him even when he had brothers who stayed in? The details are not ringing any bells for me, but that doesn't mean that doesn't mean it's not a thing. Poppy the Boxer, I have a one-eyed dog and a three-legged cat, and I'm in a wheelchair. WTF would Scientology say about my family? Although I'm laughing at myself, their beliefs are disgusting. Yeah. I guess it depends on how you got in the wheelchair. But Scientology doesn't really think much of animals. Like, I've never heard a Scientologist say, my animal is PTS or my animal is an SP. Although my younger brother's father, so he used to be my stepdad, but then our parents got divorced, and so he's not my stepdad anymore. His name is Frank DiMartino, and he loves dogs. He loves dogs so much that he has decided that dogs are people who were high-powered executives in their past life and wanted to take an entire lifetime just to relax and do nothing. Now, I feel like if I was a high-powered executive in my past life and I wanted to come back and do nothing, I would come back, make $1 gazillion, and spend the rest of my life doing nothing. I don't think I would come back as a dog. But Frank's belief that dogs are past life executives on vacation causes him to treat his dogs better than he treats his wife, Pat. Okay. And if the dog wants to get on the couch, Pat has to get off the couch so that the dog can sit there. Okay. So even Scientologists can also look, Scientology is already messed up, but Scientologists also use Scientology to justify the crazy shit they want to be true, but want to put some horsepower behind it by like putting some L. Ron Hubbard tech behind the thing they really want to be true. So like, do all Scientologists think that dogs are past life high-powered executives on vacation and should be treated better than your spouse? No, that's mostly just Frank DiMartino. But it's an example of a Scientologist who's using Scientology to justify how he wants to treat his dogs better than his wife. Okay. Yegman, didn't L. Ron Hubbard himself write to the VA and ask for help? Yeah, he did. He asked for psychiatric help. Lisa Kelson, I wonder if John Travolta believes that he pulled it in. That he pulled in Jett's autism because he is bisexual. What a horrible life to live. I never even thought of that. I mean, I never even thought of the possibility that John could have that thought, but you are correct. That is a possibility, that is something that he might either wonder about himself or that might even be pushed on him, by the ethics officer or something. Love my life. This makes me sick. I was born with cerebral palsy. Trust me, I didn't choose it. Cerebral palsy might be what James had. Let me just Google this real quick. I've got to look at the difference between cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy. Just give me 1 second. I still can't tell. Damn, I can't tell, but that's okay. Okay. El Flaco Blanco. John Travolta's lawyers said that Jett's prescription to Depakote was discontinued under medical advice. I can find nothing further but people's suspicion. Did Scientology dictate this? So super hard to say for sure, because all of our information is only good as what we're being fed. And even information in police reports, I no longer choose to take at face value. The information that I have comes to me directly from people who, while in Scientology, worked with the Travolta family and are out of Scientology and have no reason to lie about it. So even if there was a prescription that was discontinued, does that mean they still didn't have tons of pills on hand for him? We don't know for sure. Yeah. Okay. Gabrielle says, I think Jett's condition was not ised, as was John Travolta's. So long as they kept giving money, all was well. Yes. And not ised basically just means to kind of pretend like something is not really the way that it is. The pesty Hun. Are auditing sessions like an exorcism? These solo auditing sessions that you do to yourself on Scientology's upper confidential levels, particularly OT 3, from 3, 3, 4, 5, and 7. 3, 4, 5, and 7, you are telepathically communicating with spirits and getting them off of your body, which is quite literally what an exorcism is. So yeah, but lower level auditing sessions are not that at all. Oh, Jamie Castro, there you are. So John Travolta knows about Xenu. I do believe John Travolta knows about Xenu. I do believe John Travolta at least started OT3. I believe it's possible he finished OT3. I know this information is out there. I just can't I get different stories about John and where he's at on the bridge. And I just don't remember what I most recently decided was most accurate from the most reliable source. Okay. Christina, mom of 8. Recently, I had a friend who sought a cure for stage 4 cancer from Dr. David Minkoff. A nurse at Morton Plant Hospital warned her about his Scientology affiliation before she paid him the $80,000. She sadly died the next day. Wow. That is incredible. Oh, it's Gwen. It's just Gwen upside down, not a weird username. I'm going to try to turn my head upside down. So it's upside down and backwards. Yeah, it's a weird username. You could have just picked Gwen. Why does it have to be Gwen upside down and backwards? I'll try to remember it every time that I see this, that it's Gwen. Oh, you know what I'm thinking? I bet the reason it's like this is because it's her handle. I bet her screen name is actually Gwen if YouTube was showing us screen names. That is very funny. Fila, Aaron, didn't your neighbor disconnect from your dog, or was that someone else? Yes, my Scientologist neighbor did have to disconnect from my dog. That was me. That was our neighbor Sue. Here Joel says, when Juliette Lewis tried to get Brad Pitt in, Celebrity Center organized for his iguana to have a touch assist when it was unwell. Oh, dear Lord Jesus. Scientology tried to save Brad Pitt's iguana. I wish I had a tiny little doll here, although it would be creepy if I did, because I would show you what a touch assist looks like and how a touch assist is done. The number one command for a touch assist is feel my finger. That's really the only command, guys. Feel my finger. Okay. And I think you're going to see a demonstration of a touch assist in a video sometime soon. Okay, last one. Matt Elliott. Would Spanky know anything about Jett, or was she already out? I'm going to guess that she was already out. I'm quite sure of it, but I can't say for sure. Okay, guys, that is it for me for now. That might be it for me for today on YouTube. I'm not quite sure. We'll see. But thank you so much to everyone for hanging out with me, and I will see you again soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.